Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Wayland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show. Who goes there? Ulf yells in the darkness. He'd found his way into this larger cave and had ultimately gotten lost. This cave was enormous. It honestly reminded of him when he and his old friends had delved into the Underdark, looking for that lost library. To think that he had risked his life so Rowan could find a silly children's book. He chuckled to himself. He'd do it again, though. He loved his friends and would die for them. Even me? Asked a familiar voice. Ulv spun around, thrusting his torch into the enveloping darkness. Racooni? Is that you? The cave responded with silence and stillness. Truly, this cave was enormous. How had he not found a wall yet? What are memories but illusions? The drifting voice of Judir echoed around from no direction in particular. Judir, my friend! I'm so sorry, Ulv bellowed as he turned around. He'd briefly seen the visage of Judir right before it faded into the darkness of the cave. And apologies are just smoke from a dying fire. This time the voice was that of Ulv's adopted father. Ulv turned and saw the broken body of a dying man, just before it too faded into the black of shadow. You left us. This time it was Rue's voice, and Ulf saw her. Taller, thinner than usual, with deep shadows ringing her eyes, and a darkness behind. Then that too faded. Ulf kept spinning and spinning from voice to shadow to voice to shadow, until suddenly he stopped. There, standing in front of Ulf, was a woman. Ulf, who are you? It was Ulf's birthday. So what would you like to do? Welcome back to today's show. It's me, Justin, and today I will be discussing one of the most important elements of any D&D campaign, the villain. A great villain can be the driving force behind your campaign. That's why it's so important to have a great villain. You see, it can provide motivation for your players to continue the quest, and it can also give them a tangible enemy to fight. A poorly written villain, on the other hand, can make the campaign feel lackluster. You know that feeling you get when Thanos kills Loki, or when Saruman sends the horde of Uruk-hai to destroy Rohan, or when the Joker blows up a hospital? Those feelings are only possible because of well-written villains. So let's dive in and discuss how to make a great villain that your players will love to hate. Part 1. What makes a good villain? First, let's explore what makes a good villain. A great villain is one that is complex, has clear motivations, and is relatable in some way. Players should be able to understand the villain's perspective, even if they don't completely agree with it. Another key aspect of a good villain is that they pose a real threat to the players, either directly or indirectly. They should be challenging to defeat, and their actions should have consequences that impact the world around them. A villain that is too easy to defeat or doesn't pose a significant threat can leave players feeling unsatisfied. So, when creating your villain, keep these factors in mind. Ask yourself questions like this. What motivates this character to act this way? How can I make this villain a real threat to my players? Would a normal person at least consider their arguments in a reasonable conversation? Part 2, different types of villains. As you create, consider the different types of villains that you can use to add variety and depth to your campaign. One type of villain is the classic Big Bad. This is the ultimate enemy that your players will face at the end of the campaign. They're often very powerful, very dangerous, and have a grand plan that the players must stop. Another type of villain is the Mastermind. This villain operates by pulling strings and manipulating events to achieve their goals. They might not be directly involved in combat, but players feel their influence throughout the campaign. A third type of villain is the anti-hero. This is a character who is not necessarily evil, but whose goals conflict with those of the players. They may be motivated by a desire to protect their own interests or just seek revenge against someone who wronged them. Finally, consider the tragic villain. This is a character who is sympathetic in some way, perhaps because of a past trauma or a belief that their actions are justified. These villains can add a lot of depth to your campaign and make players question their own beliefs and motivations. And to be sure, your villain might end up being each of these types at one point in their life. Anakin Skywalker, for example, moved from being an anti-hero towards a tragic villain, and finally becoming Darth Vader and taking his role as the Big Bad. Maybe your villain has a similar trajectory. Part 3, how to create a good villain. Now that we've discussed what makes a good villain, let's dive into how to create one. The first step is to determine your villain's backstory. What events led them to become the person they are today? What traumas or life experiences shaped their worldview? A fleshed out backstory can add depth and complexity to your villain. Next, consider your villain's motivations. What do they hope to achieve? Are they seeking power, revenge, or something else? Your villain's motivations should be clear and understandable to the players, if not the characters. When designing your villain's personality, think about how they interact with the world around them. Are they charismatic and manipulative, or ruthless and brutal? How do they view their enemies and allies? Finally, give your villains some unique traits or abilities that set them apart from other villains in your campaign. Maybe they have a special magical ability or are particularly skilled at combat. Whatever it is, make sure it adds to their characterization and makes them a more compelling foe. Often, villains have good motives but take the wrong approach. Other times, the villains are self-interested and purely want to watch the world burn. Make sure to flesh out these intersections of motivations and backstory to really make your villain stand out. Part 4, examples of compelling D&D villains. I also want to give some examples of great D&D villains that you can draw inspiration from. For example, one compelling D&D villain is Strahd von Zarovich, the main antagonist of the Curse of Strahd campaign setting. Strahd is a vampire lord with a tragic backstory. He was once a nobleman who fell in love with a woman he couldn't have, and in his despair he made a pact with dark powers that turned him into a vampire. He now rules over the land of Barovia with an iron fist, seeking to reclaim his lost love and exact revenge on those who wronged him. Another example is Xanathar, the beholder crime lord who appears in the Waterdeep campaign setting. Xanathar is a ruthless and cunning villain. He commands a vast criminal empire using his intelligence and magical powers to stay one step ahead of players. Despite his monstrous appearance, Xanathar is a rich and complex character with a deep backstory. And a third example is the archdevil Asmodeus, who appears in various D&D settings as the ruler of the 9 hells. Asmodeus is a powerful and cunning villain who seeks to expand his influence over the multiverse. He uses his mastery of magic and deception to achieve his goals. His status as a godlike figure and the ruler of a demonic realm makes him a formidable enemy for any party of adventurers. Part 5. A live example of writing a villain. To illustrate all of this, let's briefly discuss a villain that I have in the campaign that I am currently running. And before I go on, just let me say that if anyone is listening to this that plays at my table, turn this episode off because there are serious spoilers here. Okay, for everyone else though, let's talk about Dreamtaker. Dreamtaker is an ancient Fey being who looked upon the material plane with pity. He saw the immense suffering there and wanted to do something about it. He set out to turn the material plane into the realm of dreams. He was, of course, thwarted in his attempt and banished to the realm of nightmares that he had accidentally created. While there, he found a convergence with the Shadowfell and was able, through it, to escape. He has now returned to the material plane in various forms to seek revenge and fulfill his plans of stopping reality and turning it into a dream. You know, even as I wrote this episode and thought about Dreamtaker, I thought of ways to improve him as a villain. And for one, I know that he is a threat to my players, and they know it too. He's super powerful, so that part's pretty easy. But his motivations are a little unclear. You know, I wrote that he wants to gain followers and through their belief in him, transfer the material plane to the dream world, but I think I could do a little bit better on fleshing that out and making it a little bit more succinct and powerful. I also think that as far as being dynamic, he's not super dynamic. He's pretty one-sided. So that's where I need to work on him next. So there you have it, a live example of a villain in progress and a framework that you can follow. I would also say that when you work on your own villains, write everything out first. Then summarize it into those points mentioned above, and from there, just edit. You know, I'd love to see what kinds of villains you come up with, and I'm hopeful that this has helped. If it has, or if you are in the process of writing your own villain, make sure to post them on Instagram and tag How to Be a Better DM to let us know what you made. Thank you for listening to another episode. We'll be back next week for an even better episode. But until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative. Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.